both World War II pilots. Just a word so you understand what happened back in those days. Less than 50% of the pilots made it back. Very few ever made 35 missions. Both of these made 35 missions. Okay. And Lew was in the European theater, Germany and those guys, and Chauncey was over in the Pacific, Japan, and so on. So today, if you don't have any questions right off the bat, we'll let Lew get started with his presentation on the B-17, Chauncey, the B-29. Here's your mic. That's all it should be.
Yeah. See? Wanted just to prove to you that I could stand up.
If you get it closer, it'll work.
Hey, today I'm the guy that starts the bull rolling. Hey, we're all excited and delighted to have you here. And by the way, you didn't for me. Applause, which I so richly deserve but seldom receive, which is obvious. But listen, man, after that introduction, I can't hardly wait to hear what I'm going to say. What?
Right here.
Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about my experiences in flying a four-engine B-17 Flying Fortress out of England to bomb Germany 35 times with a mighty 8th Air Force in World War II. I presume you're here to listen. However, if you should finish listening before I finish talking, hold up your hand, we'll do something else. Yeah, I'm one of those guys that's done it all, but can't remember most of it, so I have to have this gadget here. Okay, now, I'm a native Wichitahan, and on a brief personal note, when I was going to Wichita North High in 1941, y'all remember 1941, don't you? Got a man down here who does. I went to school with a couple guys that turned out to be important. One of my best buddies was a young fellow by the name of Tommy McConnell. He had two older brothers, and when the war started, all three went down together and enlisted in the Air Force. They went through flight training together. Then they learned how to fly B-24 bombers. That's this bomber with the twin tails. It's a good bomber, not nearly as good as a B-17, though, but it was a pretty good bomber. There was a plant outside of Detroit that built these bombers. This plant was half a mile long. That's 9 football fields, a quarter of a mile wide. And by the end of the war, they were putting out one of these 4-engine bombers every hour, 24 hours a day. Built over 18,000 of them. The B-17 pilots and B-24 pilots were always in kind of competition with each other. This plant was in a little place called Willow Run. Yeah, Willow Run. I couldn't think of that. And of course, we B-17 guys always called it Will It Run. The B-24 guy didn't like that too well. I had another classmate at Wichita North High. His name was Jimmy Jabera. He's a little short fellow, loved to talk. He was real animated through his arms around. He also joined the Air Force when the war started. And he learned to fly fighter planes. So he flew out of England, and his job was to protect the bombers when they bombed Germany. He was credited with shooting down 2 German airplanes. Now, when the war ended, Jimmy stayed in the service. And when the Korean War came along, he was flying jets. And Jimmy Jabera, my buddy from Wichita North High, became America's first jet ace. He was the first one to shoot down 5 MiG-15s. In fact, before the Korean War was over, he was a triple ace, 15 victories, full colonel, and the word was out there pretty quickly. He probably was going to be the youngest general in the Air Force. Unfortunately, he lost his life in an automobile accident. But we honor his memory with Jabera Airport, and I forgot to mention that we honor the McConnells, the brothers with McConnell Air Force Base out here. So as you can see, I've been around a while. I'm what you call chronologically gifted. Yeah, that means I'm old, you know, actually. I point now where I get winded playing a game of chess or getting a rocking chair and have a little trouble getting it going. You know, getting lucky for me is finding my car in the parking lot. You know, I was always told you're supposed to honor your elders. My problem nowadays is finding any. You know, but physically things are really going downhill a little bit. But mentally, I'm still sharp as a shack. Sharp as a tack. Sharp as a tack, that is. Okay. when the war started, shortly after Pearl Harbor, I went down and enlisted in the Air Force, and they put you through a bunch of tests and say, yeah, we want you. How old are you? I told them I was 17. They said, whoops, can't take you till you're 18. So they sent me home for a year, went to Friends University working on my pre-optometry, and also worked second shift out at Beach. But when I turned 18, well, I got a letter that said, come and join us, so I did. Went through flight training. There were 3 phases there. Then they sent me down to Roswell, New Mexico, where I had 3 months to learn how to fly 4-engine B-17. Then our next phase was where they put the crews together up in South Dakota, Rapid City. A B-17 had a 10-man crew: pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, engineer, radio man, and 4 other gunners. So we had 3 months up there to learn each other's names, get acquainted, learn to work together as a team. Then they sent us to Lincoln, Nebraska, picked up a brand new B-17. They said, fly it to England. It's that away. So we flew over the North Atlantic and ended up at a place called Great Ashfield, about 90 miles north of London, where we flew 35 missions. John Keegan, the noted British historian, said that World War II was the largest single incident in the history of mankind. It was fought on 6 of the 7 continents, all the seas, in the air, and before it was over, more than 50 million people perished. There was an area over in central England about the size of the state of Colorado. In this area, there were 700 airfields, 10,000 airplanes. So the traffic was bad. There were a lot of mid-air collisions over there. Every mission I flew, there were at least 1,000 bombers in the air, if you can imagine that. As far as my personal war goes, I was a flight commander, which simply meant that I led a section of 6 B-17s or a squadron of 12. In this area, we had 40 groups of bombers and 15 fighter groups. When a group would fly a mission, they would put up 36 B-17s. That's 3 squadrons of 12, up high squadron, low squadron, and then forward squadron. Usually I led the lower squadron. As far as my personal war goes, I was a flight commander, which, well, I mentioned that. I led a squadron of 12. I flew 8 different airplanes because I kept bringing back broken. These characters over there kept shooting at us all the time. 4 times I came back with 1 engine out, twice with 2 engines out, crash landed once in France. 4 times came back with over 50 holes in the airplane, and believe it or not, not a one of my 10 crew was ever seriously wounded. They were hit by flak, by shrapnel, but their flak suit saved them. So we were some of the lucky ones. The English tried daylight bombing early in the war, and their losses were just horrible. So they discontinued that, and they bombed only at night. Well, we Yanks, we had the Norton bomb sight, and we wanted to see what we were trying to hit. So we decided to try to do it in the daytime. Well, we found out the same thing. Our losses were just awful. For 1 week in October of '43, we lost 163 bombers. That'd be 1,620 men, wouldn't it? Yeah, something like that. Anyway, it was so bad. Now, headquarters felt that if we keep our losses to 10%, they could easily replace that 10% and build a force rather rapidly. Well, 162 bombers, more like 20%. So they suspended bombing because we were literally losing the air war. So they had to make some changes. Well, they did a couple of things. First of all, they changed our formation so we could better protect ourselves. Each B-17 had 13 machine guns that would shoot a 50 caliber machine gun like that. So we did have some protection, but our major problem was that our fighter pilots, our fighter planes, our fighter protection didn't have the range of the bombers. So the Germans, they weren't stupid, so they just wait until our fighter protection would run low on gas and they'd have to return to England. And then, of course, they'd decimate our formations. The 8th Air Force lost more than any other military unit in the war. The Navy lost about a little less than 1%, Army a little more than 2%, Marines a little more than 3%. The 8th Air Force, if you consider air personnel and flying personnel, they lost 7%. If you consider just flying personnel, it gets up around 27%. So I'm pretty damn lucky to be here, by the way. Okay. Well, finally, what to solve the problem of losing losses, they finally came up with the idea of putting drop tanks, extra tanks on the fighters so they could go farther. And a new fighter, P-51, came out, had a longer range. then the fighter pilot, the fighter protection could go all the way, so they reduced our lessons quite a bit. Often, when I'm speaking to a group, somebody will say, well, what was it like flying a bomber back there? And I like to tell them, imagine you're 5 miles up in the air. Up there, by the way, you're in an aluminum tube with an 8-foot diameter, and this aluminum is such that you can take a screwdriver and go like that and punch a hole in it. And up there, of course, there isn't enough oxygen to support life, so you have to wear oxygen masks. About 2 minutes without oxygen, you're unconscious, and 4 minutes, well, you have no more problems. So those are important, but also up there, the temperature runs anywhere from 45 to 65 degrees below zero, so it's pretty nippy. So we had to wear things like long john, flight suit, Mae West, flak jacket, throat mic, oxygen mask, electric suit, flight jacket, parachute harness, fleece boots, earphones, and our links were full of 2800s, 100 octane high test aviation gasoline. Bombay had 6,000 pounds of high explosives there. These unfriendly people on the ground were shooting these 88 millimeter and 105 millimeter cannons at you. Those shells would come up and burst and put out hundreds of pieces of sharp red hot metal, and you see these holes appear in your airplane, and if you weren't lucky, some of them would appear in you too. So these nasty little fighter planes, German would fly through the formation shooting machine guns and air-to-air rockets. Hey, nothing to it, just a piece of cake. Okay, got to get to some air stories. I want to talk to you a little bit about it's time for me to sit down, my legs are good. Well, I'll talk to you a little bit about the last great battle of the war. It's called the Battle of the Bulge. It happened in the winter of 1944. Ice, cold snow, horrible winter. At this time, the Western Front was just a little bit outside of Germany, and we had 4 divisions there, and those poor guys, a lot of them were inexperienced people because the headquarters knew there wouldn't be any fighting until spring. Well, Germany was losing the war, and Hitler knew it, so he decided on a desperate gamble. He decided on a surprise attack. The plan was to drive through Belgium to the port of Antwerp, where he could get supplies and be able to continue the war. Well, he managed to amass 20 divisions, that's about 500,000 men, along a 60-mile front of Belgium and Luxembourg. And due to tremendous intelligent failure on our part, we didn't know a thing about it. 9 of these divisions were Panzer tanks, which unfortunately were the best tank in the war. Well, they waited until this extreme Arctic front was coming down to the north to start the drive, to start the attack. And so on the 16th of December, they came across. Our poor guys in that 4th Division, they were just slaughtered. Lost more people in this battle than any other battle in the war. Somewhere around 80,000 personnel were either killed, captured, or froze to death. The first day, they were about 10 miles in there. In 10 miles, they made about 10 miles. Our headquarters thought, well, it's probed 2 or 3 miles and pulled back. But again, the first day they were 10 miles. Second day, they were almost 20 miles approaching a little town called Bastogne. It was an important town because the crossroads was there, so the Germans needed it. Well, fortunately, we had some experienced people. Some of the 101st Airborne and 9th Artillery there refused to surrender, refused to retreat. So they slowed them down for about a couple of days. Finally, the Germans had to bypass Bastogne. They couldn't make them surrender. So they did. Well, finally, headquarters woke up and said, "Hey, this is the real stuff. We got to get some help up there." So they called all the generals and wanted to know who could send some extra people up there. Well, the only one that replied was General George Patton. Lost his name. He's my favorite general, by the way. His motto was haul ass and bypass, and well, that's what he did. Anyway, he said he'd get some people up there, and of course he said call out the Air Force. Well, on the 9th of December, they got us up at 3 o'clock, briefed, went out at the airplane at 5. Weather was just horrible. We sat there for 5 hours hoping the weather would break so we'd take off and help these poor guys that were getting slaughtered up there, but finally they scrubbed the mission. That was the 19th. 20th and 21st, same thing. 5 hours in the airplane, scrubbed the mission. 22nd and 23rd, weather was so horrible, 30,000 feet right down to the ground soup, that they didn't even get us out of bed. But on the 24th of December, the day before Christmas, 1944, the weather finally cleared. And the greatest Air Force the world has ever known took off. There were 2,034 heavy bombers, 17s and 24s. 936 fighters. The bomber stream was over 300 miles long. Took 2 hours to plot one point in the ground. General Castle was leading the Air Force that day. He was with the first group of 36 B-17s. Our group was the second group in the airline. And as we approached Germany, we could see that first group a couple of miles ahead. About 50 German fighters hit the first group. Of these 50, about 10 German fighters were jets. They had an operational jet at this time. We didn't have one yet. This jet was 100 miles faster than anything we had, and it had 4 30-millimeter cannons right in its nose, so it was deadly. About 5 minutes, 8 B-17s out of that first 36 went down in flames or exploded. Of course, they always try to get the leader first. They knocked two engines out of Castle's plane. He fell out of formation, of course, and when you do that, the fighters are all over you like bees on a hive. He did manage to level off about 10,000 feet, but 4 guys got out before the plane blew up. Well, we figured they worked that first group over. They'll probably come after us next. Fortunately or unfortunately, they went out the group behind us and worked on them for about a few minutes, took down 4 B-17s, but then they did come after us. 2 fortunate things happened. Number one, the jets couldn't stay in the air very long there, so they were having to go back to their base and refuel. And finally, our fighter protection got there, our P-47s, P-51s, P-38s. Man, it was a real wingding. There were dogfights all over the sky. Wherever you looked, German planes facing Americans, Americans taking German, fighters going down, B-17s on fire, parachutes opening. 3 Messerschmitts 109s came in on a formation from about 11 o'clock high. 4 American P-51s were on their tail. They got into about 900 yards, and one of the Messerschmitts exploded, so we were flying through pieces of that, hit some of our planes, but didn't take any of them down. Up ahead, I saw an American plane and a German fighter plane collide. Both pilots jumped, both parachutes opened. Along came another German plane and machine gunned the American in his parachute. Usually they didn't do that, but that's the only time I saw it. Well, as you can imagine, with by the way, all 13 guns on the ship were firing, and of course that vibrates the ship like everything. Shell cases littered the deck, and the acrid smell of cordite, of course, seeps into your oxygen mask. You can imagine with 2,000 bombers in the air, we hit almost every target of any priority, and of course the fighters went after the tanks and anything that moved on the road. So we began to blunt the German fire. Then General Patton brought 2 corps of his Third Army up 100 miles from 100 miles down south, fighting a good part of the way. And on the 26th of December, 4:45 in the afternoon, he arrived and relieved the battered bastards of Bastogne. That was pretty much the end of the Battle of the Bulge. We lost 38 bombers that day and 50 fighters, but the destruction we delivered, of course, turned the tide of the battle. You know, the world will probably never see another organization like the mighty 8th Air Force that could literally, when its Venus, could blot out the sky with its thousands of airplanes. There's certain things you remember. At our base over in England, we had a Quonset hut where they packed the parachutes. Before every mission, we'd go by and pick up a parachute. The sign over the door said, "Parachutes. If it doesn't work, bring it back." Nobody ever brought it back. Okay, I want to tell you about another. Let's see. My mind works like lightning. One brilliant flash and it's gone. My memory's not as good as it used to be, and also my memory's not as good as I want to tell you another story here. Tail gunners were important back then, and our tail gunner's name was Howard Haugerschelt. He was from Maryland, a little backwoodsy, and a little wet behind the ears, so the guys teased him quite a bit, but he took it well, came right back at him. Everybody liked him, and he did his job fine. This was on November the 4th, 1944. We were going to Hamburg, Germany to bomb the oil refinery there. The weather was just horrible. I mean, the air was. We were just bouncing all around. We always flew in formation and always bombed in formation. So when the air is rough, of course, your formation spreads apart a little bit more. But we were trying to hold formation, and we bounced, and all of a sudden we hit a humongous downdraft. Went whop, dropped about 40 foot. Everything in the airplane that wasn't tied down hit the roof, came back down. Wow. Well, of course, immediately I clicked the interphone and said, "Crew, check back. Everybody okay?" And 1 to 1, everybody checked back, except the tail gunner. So I punched the intercom again and said, we called him Howdy. Said, Howdy, are you okay back there? Well, it was kind of silent for a minute. Finally, his intercom clicked on, and he said, Skipper's voice was kind of shaky. He said, Skipper, he said, I've got a problem. He says, when we hit that last bump, I was using the relief tube, and now an extremely important part of my anatomy is stuck to the gun barrel. Well, here we were, 25,000 feet over Germany. Temperatures of minus 55 degrees below zero. Anything damp would stick to that frozen metal with a death-like grip. Well, you can imagine what came over the intercom. All kind of rude comments and whimsical statements and unprintable advice. So well, I said, come on, guys, quiet down. We got a problem. I said, Howdy, you're going to have to warm up that better or you're going to have to shoot off a few rounds. Skipper, he said, the recoil on the twin 50s. I said, how do I know it? Otherwise, you're going to be stuck for the duration, and not only that, you're going to be quick frozen. And I said, by the way, when you shoot off a few rounds, the rest of the formation would appreciate it if you didn't shoot any of them down. Well, it was quiet. You hear him grumbling back there. Pretty soon he felt the plane shape as he shot his 50s off. And then it was quiet, so again I hit the intercom, said, howdy, okay? And pretty soon he came on again, clicked on, and then first there was an oath, and then a sigh. He said, Skipper, he said, me and my manhood are again one, bloody but unbowed. I said, thank goodness, howdy. Listen, I said, we've got some sulfa drug. This is before penicillin. Some sulfa drug in the medical kit. I'll send Tom back. Skipper, he said, not on your life. Some things are sacred. Okay, whatever. Well, we went ahead, dropped our bombs on the oil refinery in return. Now, when you have wounded aboard, you shoot a red flare because you get priority landing. So as we approached the field, we shot a red flare, came right on in on the runway, and pulled off to the end. The two waist gunners got out real fast, made like they were helping him out of the airplane. Of course, the medics were there, and they made him lay down on the stretcher. Of course, they were scratching their head because they couldn't see any blood, and he wouldn't tell them where he was hurt. Anyway, sent him to the hospital, treated him for about 3 days, and he came back and rejoined the crew and finished his missions. However, he refused to sign an application for a Purple Heart because he was afraid somebody would ask him how. Okay, let me, I don't know my time now.
It's about 22, and we got about...
have I got 5 minutes?
40 minutes. You got 5 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. We'll hit one more story. This is March the 18th, 1945. We were going to Berlin. Berlin was a horrible town. It had over 600 anti-aircraft guns there. When you go to Berlin, you know you're going to get shot up. You just hope they don't hit the oxygen or the gasoline or the bomb or the explosive in the bomb bay. As you approach, unless you're the first group over Berlin, as you approach the Berlin, there'll be a great crowd from the previous anti-aircraft guns from the other groups that had passed. Now, I was breaking in a new pilot that day. It was standard procedure on a new first pilot to fly with a regular, experienced crew for his first 2 missions. So I was breaking in a new pilot. My regular co-pilot was flying on my left wing. Well, as we entered this crowd, went on the bomb run. Of course, it takes all your attention to try to keep things straight and level on the bomb run because these shells are exploded everywhere, and you see these holes appearing. So when I entered the cloud, both of my wingmen were there. We dropped our bombs, and characteristically, we after you drop your bombs, you usually drop 500 feet as fast as you can, and fairly quick turn right or left to try to get out of some of the aircraft fire. We did that, and I looked around. Neither one of my wingmen were there, and I had no idea what had happened. Well, later on, I found out that my right wingman had received a direct hit over the target, and nobody got out. The left, with my co-pilot, lost 2 engines over the target, and of course they had to fall out of formation. The fighters were all over them. 1 engine was on fire. Now our instructions were, if you can't get back to England, then go east to the Russian lines, which are about 70 miles to the east. So he headed toward the Russian lines. Fortunately, he got into some cloud cover at about 7,000 feet, so that saved him from being shot down with the fighters. But when they come out of the cloud cover, with only 2 engines and going, well, of course, you can't stay in the air. You lose altitude on 2 engines. He came out. He was right on the ground, crashed in. Plane broke in 2. 1 guy's killed. 1 guy lost his arm. My co-pilot subsequently had 4 back surgeries, but they're all beat up pretty good. But all but the one that was killed would live. And they did make Poland. They got to Grodesz, Poland, and they were taken in custody by Russian and Polish officers, treated pretty much about like prisoners. And took about 70 years by plane, trip, boat, train, and everything for them to get back. But they did, all but the one did get back. Now, by the time they got back, I'd finished my missions and gone home. So I never saw him again there. Well, we had a reunion in Cincinnati, Ohio, about 6, 7 years ago, and he lived in Springfield. So I drove up to see him. It was about 60 miles, and I asked him where the heck he'd been, and he told me. Anyway, we had a wonderful day visiting with he and his wife and his collie dog. It was great. We lived the war. Now, he's passed away since then, so it was a wonderful day. Only 2 members of my crew are still alive. My bombardier is still alive up in Wisconsin, and I'm still hanging on here. Well, listen, you've been a great audience. Appreciate your listening. If I said anything I'm sorry for, I don't mind. Listen, I want to end on a little lighter note. Last night I held a lovely hand, a hand so soft and neat, I thought my heart would burst with joy, so wildly did it beat. No other hand unto my heart could such great solace bring as that dear hand that I held last night. 4 aces and a king. Mark Twain once said, a wise man, given this is a good opportunity, shut up. This is mine. Thank you.